I'm Peter Dankmeijer, and I'm Director of the Global Alliance for LGBT Education. And today I want to do a short presentation about the needs assessment for the UNIQUE project. The UNIQUE project is a European project that aims to integrate sexual and gender diversity in vocational education. First, I want to say something about the need for this project. There's very limited research on LGBTIQ, that is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer issues in vocational education. But Dutch research showed that LGBT students are 3 times as likely than the average students to be victim of bullying, discrimination, psychological violence, and physical violence. Over 3% of the students have property vandalized by other students. 5% is threatened with violence or has been sexually harassed. And between 5 to 25% of the students, depending on which course study they are doing, feels uncomfortable with LGBT students. And this is based on a very large-scale research of National Monitoring Institute in the Netherlands. The UNIQUE project is one of these projects. It's a KA3 project, a large-scale project, and it will run from 2021 till 2023, and it has 9 partners in 7 countries. In these countries, Bulgaria, Croatia, Greece, and Cyprus, and Poland will be countries where we are doing pilots in vocational institutions, while organizations in the Netherlands and Germany are supportive with expertise. The project aims to recruit vocational teachers as ambassadors for LGBTIQ equality, to train them to do this effectively, and then to improve the institution's policy as well. Ultimately, the project aims to reduce LGBTIQ bullying, harassment, and discrimination in these institutions, but also to raise wider awareness about sexual and gender diversity in these countries. The unique needs assessment that we have started earlier this year consists of 3 parts. The first part is a desk research where we looked at previous research in these countries and to national policies and the context of European policies. The second part is a quantitative research, which is done by offering an online survey with 14 questions to vocational staff and students. And the aim was to reach 100 students per pilot country. And then we did some additional qualitative research in the form of interviews with vocational staff and LGBTI experts. And we did some focus groups with vocational students. I'll summarize the results of the desk research. It is clear that the Netherlands has been a forerunner in policy and also in projects, but the implementation of the national policy intentions in vocational institutions was not very successful. So there are, for example, theater plays to elicit discussions in vocational institutions. There are teacher trainings, and gay-straight alliances of students are being organized to empower students to take their own initiatives. But this all seems to not really change the sector as a whole, but it seems to be drops on a hot plate. In Middle European countries, in this project, it's clear that the access to the European Union some years ago has created some protective laws, especially in employment, but also in education. But it does not automatically lead to supportive attitudes. And there, but also in other countries in Europe, you see a general gap between national policies and the actual practices in vocational education. The policies are made with good intentions, but usually they're not very well implemented, not on the national level and not on the level of the vocational institutions. In part, this seems to be intentional. In some countries, you have right-wing governments or populist governments who are actually actively blocking progress in this area. But in part, there are also a series of implementation challenges that have nothing to do with government policy. There are conservative attitudes of the population. There's, in some countries, opposition by religious leaders. In many countries, there are neoliberal, decentralized policy mechanisms that block successful innovation. There's also a lack of leadership and innovation management in vocational institutions that block innovation. And there are fears and lack of skills of vocational teachers, specifically on the area of LGBTI issues. And then many of the students are in the closet and because of self-protection. And so it's difficult for them to be effective actors of change. I will now shift to the quantitative research and give you some examples of that. And on this first slide, you see two graphs. On the left, there is a graph that shows the opinion of whether there is safety for LGBTI students in the institutions. And on the right, you see a graph that shows the opinion of staff and students whether students are being harassed. So in a sense, these two graphs should be kind of mirrors of each other. And to a certain extent, you see that this is indeed the case, especially in Cyprus, but much less in Bulgaria and in Croatia. It may be that in Cass College in Cyprus, the students have a clear, and staff and students have a clearer view of the situation in their institution. This is another graph which shows the opinion of students and teachers on what they, to what extent they think that teachers have the skills to combat bullying, harassment, and discrimination. And again, you see here a very clear image in Cyprus, where most of the students and teachers think that the teachers don't have the skills to do that. And the situation in Bulgaria and in Croatia is much more ambiguous. In this slide, we see the opinion of whether the respondents think that there should be measures and policy to improve the situation of LGBTI students. There you see, again, very clear differences between the three countries. And the students of Cass College, which is the only college, vocational college in Cyprus, has a huge support for additional measures. There's also quite a lot of support in Croatia, but Bulgaria is very ambiguous about it. Then I would like to discuss how teachers teach and how students think that they will act later in professional life. We developed specific scales for this. And this is a scale for how teachers intend to teach. And the lower part of the negative part of the scale is that teachers would refuse to discuss any LGBTI issues in class. And the highest scale is that they will urge students to take the specific needs of LGBTI persons into account with a number of levels in between. And of course, the ultimate goal of vocational education would be to reach the highest step of this and to be as client-friendly as possible. You see that in Cyprus, indeed, most students and in this case teachers think that there should be about 50%, 49% of the teachers think that students should take into account the specific needs. But this is different in especially Bulgaria and to some extent in Croatia. And so it seems that the national and institutional contexts in these countries have a substantial influence on the intentions of teachers to adequately teach LGBTI client friendliness. The last question in the survey was for students only, and this also contained a scale, and the scale was on their intentions how to be client-friendly, with the lowest scale level being that they completely refuse to provide any services to LGBT clients, and the highest step would be that they will be so professional that they will take the specific needs of LGBTI people and clients into account. Here again, we see that Cyprus scores very high on this. Croatia also scores quite high on this, but Bulgaria is very mixed on this. And my preliminary conclusion would be that the supportive policy in algebra and test college have a substantial influence already on the professional intentions of students. A little bit of attention to the qualitative research that are the few issues that I picked up. What we noticed is that vocational staff don't know much about supportive legislation. LGBT experts did, but staff did not. And also, vocational staff are often only vaguely aware of their own institutions' policy and measures. We noticed that many experts and teachers mentioned that discrimination is more common in beta studies that are dominated by men than in alpha studies. And most vocational staff say they have limited skills to deal with negative discriminatory emotions. And they think that they cannot really change negative attitudes because they already have been taught to children from a young age on, and it would be kind of too late in vocational education to actually do something about it. They also fear that responses of students that are negative and of negative responses by parents and a lack of institutional support if they will tackle this sensitive subject. And the negative public opinion on sexual and gender diversity in some countries makes teaching about it quite challenging. And some respondents mentioned that the newest generation students, the so-called Generation Z, makes it more difficult to teach them on social skills in general, but also specifically on LGBTI issues. So summarizing my preliminary conclusions is that the first one is that I did one thing that I didn't mention yet. That is that coming out seems to be an important mediating factor in doing research on LGBTI bullying. Not coming out can shield LGBTIQ from negative treatment. That means that when you have a certain level of LGBT discrimination in an institution or in a country, that doesn't actually mean that that is the real level, because people who don't come out don't experience that much discrimination. And so the kind of the level of discrimination is pushed down because people don't come out. Another issue is that rejection of non-conforming gender expression seems to be the main trigger for negative treatment. And we see that also that when you look at LGBTIQ as a group, it's not really one group. Each subgroup is rejected in different ways and sometimes in more or less serious ways. And what is clear is that transgenders and non-conforming gay boys are discriminated more seriously than other groups, and that bisexuals are, independently of how they behave, treat us quite badly as well. Another conclusion is that there are substantial differences between countries, so that when you do a transnational project like this, a country-specific approach is needed. Another conclusion is that vocational education, in a sense, is different from primary and secondary education. Vocational staff are often technicians. They teach specific subject, specific job, skill, and they often lack the skills to support wider 21st century skills like client friendliness, tolerance, social awareness. A final conclusion is that a school-only approach is likely to fail because LGBTI discrimination is clearly part of a wider public attitude. And the situation, the school is not an island in a society. So you need to kind of also focus on the wider issues in society if you want to sustain change in the schools. If you want to find more information about this project, the Gail has a specific page on this, on the project. And if you want to contact me, you can find my address here. Thank you.